Hi everybody. At the start of this lecture, I want to go through a simple processing program in active mode. I want to do this in order to accomplish two main objectives. Number one, I want to make sure that we know how the computer, i.e. the CPU, executes instructions. And number two, I want to demonstrate and I want to make sure that we know exactly what's happening in memory, how data is stored, and how is data retrieved. So in order to do this, let's look at this very simple processing exercise that you have done in your in-lab portion of Studio 4. If I run this program, it's a white page comes and the circle which is drawn at point 100 and 100 because x is 100, it goes to the right, and the iteration here is 5. So I wanted to let's go through this line by line just as the computer would, right? So what would the computer do when it is reading, compiling, and executing this program? Let's go to the notes. So I have my program, my prog written here to the left. And I want to show you the screen. So what's happening in the screen with every update, and also the memory. So here is memory, and this is the memory that's been allocated to our program. So this is program my prog, and this is the memory that's been allocated to us. So let's start from the top, and we'll use a different color. So at this line, and the computer starts from the top, right? So the instructions, the CPU will read each instruction and executes each instruction one by one. So we start at the very top. First of all, we have a global variable. So in our global portion of memory, we're going to get x initialized to 100. Then we have nothing else in memory, right? Then setup comes on board. So we have setup, and setup comes on, and we have y equal to 0. So I have a couple of variables declared here. They're not really used for the purpose of the program, but they're used to show you how data is stored in different functions. So we have int y equals 0. So y is made in memory. It's 0. And then we have size 500 by 500. So we actually get a window appearing with the size 500 by 500. So I do apologize for my drawing skills, which are pretty much non-existent. So size is created, and then we are at the bottom of, so we executed this, now we executed this, and now we are at the bottom of setup. We are at the bottom of setup, and what happens is we're done with setup. But as soon as we're done with setup, meaning we are done executing the last line in setup, what actually happens is setup dies. So it leaves memory. So I put an X through it. That means it's completely wiped out. Setup lives no more. Variable y in setup lives no more. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and erase this, so I have room to draw the memory diagram for draw. So then we go and we are over here, right? We are over here in the draw function. So draw appears. So it's like that. The first line we declare z and we initialize it. So z is 6. Then background is 255. One thing I forgot to mention was that at first when this is drawn, by default, the color of the window is gray. So when we come here, I actually set the background to 255, which is white. So the color of which is pretty much the color that shows right now. So this screen changes to color white. And then we call our ellipse function. So this is done. We call our ellipse function. Ellipse comes and draws this as at 100 and 100. So if this is, let's say, 100, and this is 100 in the y direction, we get a circle. Its radius is 25, right? Because it's supposed to be, the diameter of it is 50. Okay, so we're done with this line as well. Then we go to z. Z equals z plus 5. So we add 5 to z. So this becomes 11. And then we have x equal x plus 5. And this becomes 105. So I'm just gonna say this becomes 105. Now, there is one line here missing. So what you actually have to realize is that what I've just drawn here is not actually drawn yet. So it's not actually being updated. You don't really see that yet. So if you froze time, you don't actually see anything at this point. So a lot of people think that draw in every line, it starts drawing things on that window. But reality is, you don't really see anything on this window unless you get to the very end of the draw. Of course, this happens really fast, so it's we don't notice it. But all these things that we've done and I've drawn here, the screen hasn't been updated. So the all important invisible line. So here is the invisible line, which updates, go down here, the window. So when we get to the end of draw, and this is something that we don't get to see because it's the invisible line. So all of a sudden the window appears. So you actually get to see the window with a circle in the middle of it, right? So let me just erase the rest of that stuff. So that's what we get. That's what we get to see, right? Then we are at the end of the draw function. So what happens to the draw function is that draw function also dies. So the draw function completely dies and it is no more. However, because we're running a processing program, what happens is draw gets called again. So draw appears again. And that's a really strange thing about draw. And that's what makes processing unique, and you guys should understand is that draw keeps on appearing again and becoming live again. So there are a few things that the processing environment does behind sort of behind the scenes, and it's transparent to us. So it's important that we understand that is happening. The reason is the draw function works beautifully when you want to draw, when you want to create animations. So that's why it's done. So what happens is draw function actually completely goes away. So that's what we are left with. Notice that our global variable is still hanging out here. It'll remain there basically, where z was already destroyed because it was a local variable to draw. So now processing calls draw again, so then draw appears again. So draw appears again. Z is created again, so this is another z. It's set to 6, and we're going to go through each step. The background is created. So when background is 255, we're going to paint over this thing. When we paint over this with white, that means the old circle is gonna disappear. Then we're gonna draw another circle And the window hasn't been updated yet, but I'm just drawing it anyway. So the window is going to be updated with x as 105. So our circle is going to be drawn a little bit to the right, a little bit more to the right. So let's say if this was 100 and, well, I guess it's less, right? Because we're moving it by 5. So, this is 105, and let's say this was 100. Then z is going to become 5, so this is going to be 11, and that's why, you know, so you see z, it repeats again, and that's why it's useless to have anything in draw. And then we're going to have x equals x plus 5, so this thing becomes now 110. And then the invisible line comes forth, which this drawing is created again. And then we're at the end of draw. And we're done. Draw, it dies again. And then another time, we have another draw and keep going until an x keeps getting larger and larger again. And this program continues to run until it crashes due to the fact that x is getting very large, and eventually the variable x is not going to be able to hold the value because you keep adding 5 to it. It's an integer. Or until you press the X button and close that program. Processing does deal with the value of x getting larger to a point, so that's something that you'd have to watch for. But that's exactly what's happening in memory. So if everybody's clear on this, then we're good to go to the next topic, which actually builds on this, and it's the topic of loops. So stay tuned for that. Thanks.